I always have a key message to do with recruitment, and that is change is a constant. If all we needed to do was to actually put processes in place for a recruitment process that is staying static, that would be one thing. But actually, there are lots of things moving out there that actually make the challenge of putting these processes into place even harder, because we're actually trying to embed a process in a continually changing world. Perhaps just as a prelude to looking at the why and the how aspects of the process of recruitment are actually set there to continue to change, it's worth pausing for a second just to look at where we are perhaps now. The internet has effectively allowed a planet's worth of vacancies to come into view to everybody that wants to view them. The counter to that is also that planet's worth of potential candidates can also apply for those vacancies, whether they're qualified or unqualified, with a push of a button. Coupled with this, the social footprint that we're all putting down means that effectively in time we'll all be able to be traced, whether we like it or not. People will be able to find anybody on the planet that they want to. But a planet's worth of potential candidates needs to be coerced and matched to a planet's worth of potential vacancies for tasks or roles. In essence, therefore, what the internet has created is unprecedented volume in terms of volume of transactions and also volumes in terms of noise. And the key now for me is to actually turn that volume into something more meaningful than it is now. Many of the speakers today are actually going to talk about what they're doing to actually affect turning that volume into something more meaningful. And as such, what I'm going to look at is the whys and wherefores of why change is a constant in recruitment, just to set everything else today perhaps into context. So just by way of running order, which I'll get through very quickly in 20 minutes, just looking at why some changes in the process of recruitment are inevitable, and focusing on two key elements for me, one of which is the further fragmenting workforce. It's not just now about permanent employees and a few temps and contractors. And also having a look at two of the key enabling technologies that are affecting change as well. I'm going to focus more on the why things are going to change, because, as I said, lots of people today are actually going to look at how and the actual mechanisms for doing that. But I will summarise with how some of those changes are likely to play out and what that means in terms of conclusions for hirers, for candidates and for the recruitment industry. Just by way of background for me, in terms of context for recruitment, I spent 7 years with what was Vedior, which I was likened to being the WPP of recruitment, which then turned into Randstad when Randstad acquired the group about 4 years ago. My first role there was to actually support 36 operating companies in the UK, of which they were part of 260 worldwide, to look at their market positioning when the whole managed service aspect came about. And because Vedior's portfolio was so broad and wide, broad and deep, that meant that I actually spanned quite a lot of markets and capabilities in terms of research. For the last 3 years that I was at Randstad, I was responsible for all of the research for the UK group of companies. And in essence, what we did there was we brought the external factors in and mashed it up with what we knew about the internal business and created a stream of insight to go through to the operators. And also we produced materials like these on the screen to actually go back out into the marketplace. So Shifting Sands was about the agency worker regulations. The World of Work report was an annual publication about HR trends. A Navigator report, which is the last one I wrote before I left, was looking at some phenomenal case studies of people who had transformed their recruitment processes, even though it was very troubled times out there, often because they had to transform them because there were troubled times out there. Thinking that I might get away from writing reports just for a little while when I left late last summer, I was asked by the REC to research and write up a future look into the recruitment processes on their behalf. It was actually for the technology sector group for the REC. And Recruitment 2022, if any of you saw it on the wires, was published just before Christmas. And what it was, in essence, was a distillation of the opinions of about 42 people that were interviewed for the research, and then also that distillation was supported by additional substantive third-party research. And those are some of the contributors there. Just for anybody that's interested, the report is actually free from if you're a corporate member of the RAC, or if any of your suppliers are corporate members of the REC, it's possible to get access to a free copy of that report, should you be interested. But many of the areas I'm covering today are from this report. And then just in terms of me individually, I operate a company called Worklab, and we look particularly at 3 different areas. It's all about enabling people to make better informed decisions than they can make today, be they school children, be they FE and HE college students, be they people on the in-house or on the recruitment side or other aspects of HR services that perhaps need to look at their positioning. But the area that I spend most of my time in now, just by way of background, is about looking at the impacts of some quite revolutionary technologies in manufacturing that are coming down the line, particularly 3D printing. So I spend most of my time at the moment looking at the impacts of change from emerging technologies. Anyway, first, in terms of those why things are set to change, I've actually worked right across all those different areas of what I call the onion, all the different layers of the onion throughout my working career. So I've been a full-time employee, I've been a collaborator by way of running franchises within high street retailers, I've worked in the BPO industry, and as I said, for the last 7 years I've actually worked within the recruitment space. But what I've seen emerging in my time is that the number of people that are actually deployed across these layers of the onion are actually increasing. So it's, as I said earlier, it's far less about fixed employees and a few contingent workers. And now if you actually mapped the numbers of people who are actually working on your behalf across all those different layers, the actual spread of people is actually moving away from the centre. It's moving away from permanent employees, full-time employees, out across these layers of the onions. And that's really interesting because it's about how you measure productivity and measure performance of all people who work on your behalf, not just those people who are actually on the payroll of the organisation. So that's some of the things that we're going to have a look at. In terms of how people are planning to deploy resource in those different areas of the onion, this was some research by KPMG from last year that actually looked at what European buyers were planning to do. And the swing there for me is that what you've got is far less role-based working. So the actual swing for the swing for 2012 is the brown box. The swing is to far less full-time employees, even independent contractors and agency workers, and the swing is far more to the left in terms of deployment of what I call outcomes-based working. So statement of work individuals, outsourced service provision and offshore service provision. So a big swing from I'm going to engage somebody to do a fixed role for me, and then swinging to the left in terms of actually what I want is an outcome, and I'm going to engage resource across those various different layers of the onion to actually give me a guaranteed outcome rather than just hiring an individual who may or may not work out for me. Coupled with that, what you've got is an increased interest in working on a contingent basis. I met Andreas Gosch when I was doing some research for Randstad, a very smart, intelligent person, and I carry this statement with me wherever I go, but he believes that the intelligent person with scarce skills is actually increasingly taking charge of their own destiny and actually determining where they want to work, on what, and during what time frame. The rest, he says, actually still require patronage. So that, again, is something that I think we need to set into context. By way of numbers, we have 1.65 million temps in the UK. That's 6.5% of the working population. We've got roughly the same number of people who are actually self-employed freelancers. And the Professional Contracting Group coined the phrase through a piece of recent research called IPROs, so independent professionals. And the key there is that the swing there has been quite significant during the downturn, but actually from a UK perspective, the UK is actually leading Europe in terms of interest in working in this capacity, and UK independent professionals now constitute 19% of the European total. Again, just sort of backing this up with some other research from Randstad, in terms of choosing to work on a temporary or contingent basis, again, there are just some indicators about who chooses to actually work on a freelance or contract basis. And obviously the swings mostly to those, again, who are in charge of their own destiny, so those higher-end interim professionals, and also some frontline people on PAYE as well. Another interesting aspect beyond the actual layers of those onions is an area that I call fragmenting of the actual role. And crowd is a very interesting area to look at because while small still within the UK, it's actually becoming quite significant elsewhere. In terms of crowd workers, there's some data there to support the growth of this area. And crowd is effectively where you're actually splitting off a tiny bit of a role and you're putting it out into the ether for somebody to grab and actually do for you. You know, they need to demonstrate their ability to deliver an outcome. They do it for you, and they give that work back, and you actually pay them on results. So it's outcome-based working. So this has originated from the US and it is expanding from there. But so those are some numbers in terms of the people who are crowd working. And in terms of the crowd providers, again, just some indicators as to how strong these organisations are. People often ask me in which areas is crowd actually taking hold in terms of the splitting off of tiny bits of roles, fragmenting roles. Just pulling some data from Odesk, which is one of the major providers of crowd. This is the data supporting where the US completed projects are actually being delivered. So that's kind of your start point for crowd, because that's where it originated from. Going to some of the areas that are actually supporting people who want crowd working, there's again indications from India and also Bangladesh. Bangladesh is really interesting because they've just passed a piece of legislation that says that any dollars earned over the internet will actually be tax-free from anybody actually delivering work in Bangladesh. Very smart move. And as a consequence, you're seeing that a lot of Bangladeshis are actually supporting this working through the crowd. So again, Bangladesh is one to watch at the moment. In terms of the UK, still quite small numbers, just 23,000 projects completed through Odesk. But again, just showing that what's happening in terms of projects delivered is quite similar to the US there. But what that actually means to those layers of the onions is you've not just got people moving out across the layers of the onions, you've also got bits of roles actually being chipped off as well. And those bits of roles that are chipped off are their outcomes-based tasks. Just one other factor in terms of crowd working for the UK. I just want to drop a couple of things in here about why there is potential for crowd to really soar within the UK. The issue of underemployment, those people who want or need to actually do more work, is quite prevalent in the UK. And that quote, people in work wanting to work more hours, was actually from the ONS. So this isn't spin doctors, this is the Office of National Statistics actually saying that there are 3 million people in the UK who actually want or need to earn more money. So that's quite key in terms of a driver. And another driver that we looked at within Randstad was worker stagnation. There are lots of people in jobs that they don't want to be in anymore, but they feel trapped or they feel frightened to move because of the climate. Now, those people have talents and passions that they want to follow, but they often can't. So you actually found that these people are actually working, are actually participating in crowds, not necessarily monetised crowds at the moment, but crowds that help them to further their own professional development or the development of their profession. And it's likely that those crowds will eventually be monetised. So that's another catalyst for why crowd is likely to grow. So just some conclusions there. Fragmentation of tasks, outcome-based working, the concept of permanent employment or roles is becoming obsolete. And from the candidate's perspective, the need to evidence that you can deliver against a task and potentially be paid on outcomes is also increasing. Just quickly on the technology side of things, there's just one slide on this. This is really interesting for me because, again, of recent developments. The enterprise-wise systems like SAP and Oracle's obviously had HR information systems within the suite. Those two companies have recently done two very smart acquisitions, one of Taleo and one of SuccessFactors, and what that's actually given them is everything associated with applicant tracking systems within the suite of the enterprise resource planning system. Because all those ATSs come with affiliations with potential that they could also purchase vendor management systems. What you're looking at there is an end-to-end technology solution that actually could measure the productivity and performance of anybody who actually works on behalf of an organisation, not just the fixed employees, not just a few temps, but anybody across the whole extended enterprise. So, and that's quite key because for all of these areas of the onion and those bits that's been split off into the crowd to be productive, they need to be interoperable. We need to actually be able to track and measure the performance of all these people in all those different places. Once that happens, recruitment has the potential to be finally acknowledged as the most important HR and people process. What it also allows you to do is to actually look at quality of hire as becoming the only important future recruitment metric. So time to hire, cost of hire, they're not important if you actually have systems that allow you to actually look at the productivity of all those people. Once you can see the productivity of those people, you can reverse that back and actually put that back into the recruitment funnel and say, I want to hire for outcomes. So my whole recruitment process will be about trying to find people and demonstrate who can demonstrate that they actually have the ability to deliver outcomes. And that turns the whole set of recruitment metrics on its head. Just quickly, and it's picking up Alistair's point from earlier on as well, about the candidate experience as well. The other thing from a technology perspective is that the connected world allows for both opportunities and challenges. We will be found, but also the important thing here is that the expectation level of candidates is exceptionally high because they have expectations that come from retail and from consumer services. And with those areas, they expect to have one seamless, personal and multi-channel dialogue. That's the expectation. For me, that expectation is coming to recruitment. Just some data for you, just to be released from the Candidate Experience Awards later this month. This, again, was just a mashup of words from surveys from the US, the US survey, which has been running for 2 years now, about candidates showing some feedback about their perhaps negative experience. Just some data that they've allowed me to use today. 40% of the people they surveyed for the UK, the UK survey said that they had an existing relationship with the hirer that they're actually applying to, either as a customer or because a family friend was working there, or they were an advocate for the company. 20% admit to actually being a customer of that organisation. That's a really key starting point if 20% of the people are actually customers. And in terms of sharing experiences on the wires, some data there, and also through with the immediate circle and also through the wires. But the key thing here for me is that 1/3 of those surveys actually admitted to receiving no response whatsoever to an application. Which other sector would actually allow that to happen? Which other sector or discipline would actually treat people, consumers, in this way? So I do think that we do have to, as Alistair said, not just make 2013 the year of the candidate experience. It's just got to be in our psyche now. Centrica, even more extreme. Centrica, half of the people who apply to work for British Gas are actually existing customers, and as Matt Berry says, the other half are potential customers. So that kind of focuses the mind in terms of how you treat them. And Matt Burney from G4S, again, making reference to the fact that the expectations are very similar to e-commerce now. So just some conclusions relating to here. The multi-channel experience is becoming an expectation. From a candidate's perspective, time invested in going through an application form is their currency, and increasingly they're going to expect a return on investment for that currency. I think that for me is particularly key. The personalised experience they get through retail and through consumer services, again, is coming to recruitment. And underpinning all of this, the monitoring and influence of brand sentiment will be absolute paramount, whether you're a direct hirer or whether you're an intermediary working on behalf of a direct hirer. It's absolutely essential now to monitor sort of brand influence. Now, Alan, I've got a bit more, but I think you might be looking as if I want to wrap up. Okay, right. Okay. Those were just some conclusions for the candidate. And just one final message for the recruitment industry, because what I tried to do was to give some conclusions there about what might be changing for the three areas. This was Peter Whitehead's view from the Financial Times on reading the Recruitment 2022 report, and I'll be giving the recruiters this afternoon the same message. But again, most people reading what they read could actually see that the recruitment process and industry is set fair to change. And the key thing there is what are people actually paid to do now? And in terms of impact for the recruitment industry, the starting point really should be look at what am I currently paid to do, and if all of these things are potentially going to change, what might I get paid for in the future, and perhaps I ought to put a commercial model together to support that. Thank you.